Good morning. Hey, everybody. We're just getting ready to get going here in about 5 minutes. So we're just going to get settled in. And yeah, just looking forward to the time that we have together. We'll officially get started in a few minutes. And if you want to take the time to introduce yourself on chat, that'd be fantastic. Hey, Rexina, great to have you here. Thanks for coming in. Thanks for being early. Really looking forward to today's session. Fundraising is probably one of my all-time favorite topics. And so, yeah, looking forward to not only the session, but any questions or comments. So if you do have any questions, even if you want to put a question in now to get started, love to hear it. Definitely would love to answer any and all questions about fundraising right now. So we're just starting to see some people coming in, and yeah, looking forward to hanging out with you for the next, excuse me, about 90 minutes or so. Hey, Olsey, great to see you again. And yeah, I think that over the next little while, what we'll do is we'll try and really dig in and demystify. Thank you, Olsey. And so, yeah, we're looking forward to digging in and, demystifying capital raising, and really just having an honest conversation about where there's value, where there's not, why we do it, how we can tackle this in this kind of recession time. I think there's some really interesting data points that I'm excited to share with you, and so I hope that proves to be worthwhile. So. Yeah, and so we're just having some people pop in, which is great. Looking forward to having everybody here. Hey, Mentor, great to have you on board. Yes, yeah, Olsey, yeah. Thank you for the reminder that it is the afternoon in Tirana. It is almost 9 a.m. in Vancouver. And in case you guys are curious, it is about 14 degrees Celsius right now in Vancouver. Today's high is supposed to be about 17 degrees. Anita, great to have you back. All right. Yeah, looking forward to this time. Hey, Dorian, great to have you on board again. And just while we're waiting for the rest of the folks to jump in, everybody, I did just create a poll, which you can see down at the bottom of the page. And if you can, take the time to fill out that poll and let us know. Let us know, where you're at in your fundraising journey. And yes, we'll see. We are definitely in spring. Definitely. Time for new beginnings, time for change. So should be a great time. And it's a time for caffeine. So cheers, everyone. I'm hoping someone in Tirana has like a glass of wine or a beer while I'm holding up my tea. I'm just saying. Yeah, and thanks everyone for starting to fill out the poll. I've got a few votes so far on when do you plan on raising money. So if you want to just continue to fill that out, if you have not filled it out yet, it's down below. Anita, thank you for having red wine. It's good to see some inspiration. It'll be something that I can look forward to at the end of the day here. Sarah, greetings, welcome. Great to have you here. Iced tea. You guys are probably what, mid 20s Celsius? Hey, Erikins. Great to have you. Yes, nice, Ulcie. Oh, so Anita, is it over 30 degrees Celsius? That would be so warm. Here in Vancouver, just for everyone, I would say the absolute hottest that it ever gets in Vancouver is 30 degrees Celsius, which might happen 2 days a year. Usually for us, the highest it gets is about 28 degrees Celsius. Average in the summertime is probably 24. So about that. Yeah. So just to give you some context. Great. So we've got a good crew of people. I think what we'll do is we will get started in just a couple minutes now. A lot of good familiar faces here. So for those who know, obviously down below, ask a question. I find fundraising to have usually the most questions of any topic. How to do it, where to get it, terms and conditions, definitions. I had somebody ask me today the difference between seed A, B, and C rounds, which is a fantastic question. And so any and all questions, if you guys want to start to pop those in down below, that'd be great. Really looking forward to this time. And then for everybody who's on chat, you can see that Luann with the spring team is on chat as well. So don't be shy to ask a question. If you want to come in and ask it and talk, then I'd be more than happy to do that as well. And just for those who are new coming in, do make sure that you fill out the poll down below about when you are planning to raise money. Whether you don't know if you're going to do it in the next 3 months, the next 6 months, or in 2021. And right now, 2021 is leading the charge. So if anybody else wants to put in a vote, that'd be fantastic. And we'll go from there. So I think we'll get started in just a minute. And as you guys can see, I have a presentation. This is definitely the kind of topic that requires some presentation material. And what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try and do a couple things. One is just talk a little bit about fundraising overall. And then the second thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about some of my experiences and some of the lessons that I've learned over time, both raising money myself as well as securing funding from others or for others, I should say. And then the last part that I want to cover off is just this topic of, kind of fundraising in a crisis. And so what we'll do is we'll spend some time in all of those topics as we go through. And then we'll take it from there. So yeah, looking forward to this time that we have. So cool. Yeah, so I'm going to just expand and focus my screen on this deck that we're about to go through. And so as we go through, if you have questions, just pop them into the Ask a Question down below. Also very curious to hear your comments and feedback as well. So really looking forward to this time. And as a starting point, again, I would just love to thank EU for Innovation for allowing this webinar series to happen. It's been an amazing series of sessions, and the questions and the comments and the engagement has been so good. It reminds me of why I'm always excited to come to Tirana and to Albania, and why I'm looking forward to doing it again eventually when they lift this lockdown. So definitely excited to do that. But thanks for EU for Innovation for allowing this to happen, and just providing this vehicle for supporting entrepreneurs through this crisis and recession. So just a reminder for those who don't know Spring, we exist to change the world through entrepreneurship. We have done a tremendous amount of work over the last 6.5 years globally. And then the one highlight I just want to give you guys, bottom left of this screen, you'll see that we have helped entrepreneurs through our funding roundtables to raise over 24 million in the last couple of years. So this topic that we're facing and addressing tonight is a topic that's very near and dear to our heart. It's very important, and it's something that I think we find can create a lot of impact. And so we're really excited about that. As you know, we've done work all over the world. And obviously for the last couple of months that's been online, but it's really great because it allows us to meet not only entrepreneurs but also investors from around the world and understand what they're thinking, how they're investing, how deals are being done. And so for us, that's just such a really important time. So what we're going to do is we're going to just talk through kind of some baseline on fundraising. And as we start to lean in again, just down below, ask a question, type in any question that you have about fundraising, and we'll go into it. But it is important to note that there are several ways that you can raise money for your business, right? So your own investment, like your own money. The second one, of course, is to get money from friends and family. The third one is revenue. The fourth one is through things like grants and loans, which we will talk a bit more about later. Crowdfunding, which has really transformed fundraising overall in the last 10 years. Maybe 12. 12 years ago, you could not raise $1 anywhere in the world on fundraising, or crowdfunding, I should say. Crowdfunding didn't exist. Kickstarter was just getting launched. And so now you will see that over the last, I think, 10 years, roughly $65 billion has been raised through crowdfunding. And so it's a huge and growing opportunity. And it's something I think that is a great opportunity for everybody to take a look at. And then equity, of course, is raising money from investors. And investors, just to be clear, can include angel investors, angel groups, and venture capital funds. So all of those kind of fit under this kind of umbrella of equity. And so So the reason that I'm sharing this with you is because it is important to note that each one of these has pros and cons to choosing it when investing in your business. And so one example that I like to talk about is yourself, right? And it's important to remember that your own bank account is what we call the bank of last resort. And the bank of last resort means that when things get challenging in your business, like that's the one and the final bank account that will actually invest in your business. And so it's just really important that we keep that in mind as we go through. Is if you have 100 euros to invest in your business, I always like to recommend that people invest 50 euros in your business, and you keep 50 euros safe in your bank account or in your back pocket, so that when things get tough, you know that you can invest because no one else will. And so that's the important part. That's why we call our own investment the bank of last resort, is because it is the one investment that can occur when no one else will invest. Revenue is your greatest opportunity to control your destiny, right? So revenue does not cost you interest. It does not need to be repaid, or at least usually it doesn't. And it does not cost you any percentage of your business. And so revenue is just such a fantastic way for us to dig in and kind of really see an opportunity to, kind of fund our business through revenue. So just moving on, the other key piece to keep in mind as we go through is that each source of funding is time dependent, right? So you investing in your own business and friends and family, that can usually happen in 6 weeks or less. With revenue, for some of you who are already in revenue, you can generate revenue today. For others, it may take a bit more time because you're not yet in revenue. And then in addition to that, we have grants and loans. Grants and loans generally take 4 to 12 weeks to secure, depending on the situation. Crowdfunding, it takes time, 12 to 26 weeks to be able to receive the money from crowdfunding campaigns. And then equity takes the longest, not uncommon. 4 to 6 months is very common for fundraising. And so that's a really important kind of distinction to make as we go through this process. So just keep that in mind as we go through. Now, in addition to that, what we're going to do is we're going to just talk about the stages of funding. Again, we're just laying some more groundwork here. And if you do have questions, definitely let me know. But with crowdfunding, with the stages of investment, one of which is crowdfunding, and you can see that in the launch stage as well as the build stage. At each moment in time, at each stage of your business, it is important to note that there are kind of generally accepted rules for what you will seek as investment in your business. And so, we have, early on, we have the self-funding, which we talked about earlier. Bootstrapping is a combination of your own funding as well as revenue. And then when we start to push out, we can start to then expand into friends and family when we have greater confidence in the future of the business. Government grants, if they are available. And actually, I'd be curious if anybody wants to type in the chat if there are any government grants or donor grants that you are aware of in your country. It would be great just to mention them in chat as well. I'd love to talk through those. And then we start to see angels come at the launch stage and a little bit before sometimes. But angel, so thanks, Erikins. EU for Innovation is a great example of an organization that provides grants. And so these are things that we want to be looking for because sometimes they are, right place, right time for our business. And, you don't have to give up any equity. Often there's no repayment methods required. And so the Challenge Fund from EU for Innovation, definitely worth a search. Erikins, if you have a URL that you want to pop in a chat, that would be great. So these are the different stages. And so it is an important point that you'll notice, for example, venture capital funds almost never invest pre-launch. And so if you are thinking about raising money and you are pre-launch and you're not yet in revenue, the chance of raising money from venture capital funds is very low. You would want to not put any time there because you would probably waste time. So what you would want to do is you would want to focus that time on angel investors who have a higher probability of investing at the earlier stages. There's a question that was raised, and the question is it's from Erkins, and it says, can you set up a crowdfunding campaign from Albania? And so, Erkins, that's a great question. I think it is worth checking. But the last time that I looked, the two major platforms, and I'm going to put these into... So sorry, I just typed them in and then I realized I spelled Indiegogo wrong. Sorry. So Kickstarter and Indiegogo, the last time I checked, it was possible. And so these are two platforms that would be worth looking at. Now, what I would tell you is that with Kickstarter and Indiegogo, the success of your crowdfunding campaign is primarily determined on the amount of money that your network, your own network, puts into the crowdfunding campaign. So typically about 90% of the money that you raise will come from those people. And sometimes you have a campaign that will take off, and then you'll raise a lot of money from strangers and from the crowd. And at which point your friends and family will represent about 33% of the campaign. Now, there is another platform that you can definitely look at. Actually, two more that I will mention. One is GoFundMe, and then the next one is Kiva. And the reason I mention those is because they definitely have a global footprint. They tend to be for much smaller amounts of money. And when I say much smaller, we're talking about something in the order of, say, 500 to 5,000 euros. So definitely much smaller. But if you're very early in pre-launch, then, hey, it might be worth taking a look at those. Kickstarter and Indiegogo allow you to raise much larger pools of money. I don't know what the current record is for the largest Kickstarter campaign. I know it used to be a couple of $1 million, but it is something that's worth taking a look at. So that's a fantastic question. And yeah, again, take a look at those platforms. My encouragement to you is if you're trying to raise more than 5,000 euros, look to Kickstarter and Indiegogo. If it's less than 5,000 euros, you can look at GoFundMe and Kiva as being examples for how you can do that. So fantastic question. Thanks for asking that. And if you guys want to keep asking questions down below under Ask a Question, and then we can keep going. So yeah, excited for more questions. Yeah, there you go. Luann just highlighted the Pebble Time smartwatch, $20 million raised in Kickstarter. And that is a lot of money. Just as an aside, crowdfunding campaigns work really well for consumer-based businesses, especially if it's something physical, like food, bicycles, hardware, like in this case, a smartwatch. But it tends to be a business-to-consumer product, and it tends to be something that's physical that people can touch and feel and experience. Some of the earliest $1 million plus campaigns were actually bicycles, electric bicycles and bamboo bicycles. So just food for thought. Cool. So we're going to keep going. So I just want to talk about kind of the known reality of fundraising and raising money from investors. And raising money is hard. And it's hard for a few reasons. One is that the average investor looks at a lot of deals. And so they say no to a lot of things. So you, as the entrepreneur, you have to talk to a lot of investors in order to find enough people who will say yes. And And so there's a couple of rules of thumb that we use at Spring based on our experience, and we've helped more than 100 entrepreneurs to raise money, is that on average, you will reach out to 60 investors. On average, you will have at least 40 first meetings and then multiple meetings for investors after that to eventually get down to somewhere between 10 and 20 checks. And, typically those are the right ranges, about 12 investors into a round of, say, 250,000 euros or more. If you have a smaller round size, you'll need less investors. Sometimes you'll get investors who will write bigger checks, and so you might have as little as 6 investors. I've seen as high as 20. I've actually seen more, but you don't want to go higher than 20 because it just becomes hard to manage at that point in time. So kind of rule number one for why it's hard is it's just you have to take a lot of time to meet people. But there's a reason why we want to. And the reason, of course, is because some investors will bring more than the check. They will bring industry expertise. They will bring business model expertise. They will bring a network of other people to invest in your company. They'll bring a network of partners and customers. They'll bring a network of potential talents to add to your team. So there's actually a lot of good reasons to meet with these investors, is because they can bring more value beyond just their investment. And when you get all of this critical feedback about your business, it helps you actually improve your business to make it better. And so the important part in this whole exercise is, if you're meeting that many people, what you want to do is create a funnel, right? It's a sales process, and that's part of us demystifying everything, is that it is a sales process. We have an opportunity to really, manage the process efficiently. And so these are the stages that not only I have experienced in raising $15 million into my own business, but these are the stages that I've, worked with entrepreneurs to help raise about 80 million. And so it just goes through kind of a nice, tight kind of 10-step process, 11-step process. And the important part is that we just manage this, both to manage the funnel, but also to manage our own expectations, right? So that we don't get frustrated and impatient. And so the one thing that I want to highlight to you is that right in the middle of the page, you'll see verbal commitment. And that's where an investor would say to you, say, Anita, you're seeking investment, and you and I meet. And then after a couple of meetings, I say to you, Anita, these have been great conversations. I'm interested, I'd like to invest 25K. So that is what we call a verbal commitment. But notice a verbal commitment is only a 50% probability to close, right? And so, thanks, Anita. And so the important part is that it's only a 50% probability. You still need to put in front of me, you need to put the paperwork, we need to negotiate the terms, we need to sign the paperwork, and then I need to send you the money. And so those are the steps. We need to make sure that it's not guaranteed that we will get through that process. So I just want to highlight that as we go through. Now, let me just see here. We had a question come up, and I'm just going to post it. So the question just came up from Sunila. And so thanks for asking that. What I did is I just moved it over into the ask a question just so that I can track it. And so you asked the question, how to narrow down the search for investors that might be interested in investing in our idea. So should they be focused only on our industry or explore other sectors too? And that is a fantastic question. And so there is a sequence of criteria that we use. And so you noted the number one, which is industry, that they understand our industry, say tourism, retail food, fintech software, whatever our industry is, that is the number one criteria. And the reason is on both sides. One is we know that the industry is the most important because First, if I understand your industry as an investor, then I get it. Like, I understand the problem you're trying to solve. I understand your potential solution. It's a very easy conversation for us to have. Second, you want to pitch me because you know that I understand your industry and I can add value beyond the check, which is what we were just talking about a minute ago. So industry is number one. Number two is business model. So business model is on things like software as a service, e-commerce, marketplace, retail, right? So these are not the industry, but they're how we do business. And so business model definitely is number two, because again, if you were to say to me, hey, Keith, I'm running a marketplace that does, A, B, and C. But if I've never invested in a marketplace and I've never run a marketplace, it's going to be hard for me to wrap my head around what it is that you do. So industry first, business model second. Now, the third one is actually geography. And so geography is, have I invested in your country before, or your region, or your city? Most investors will invest in their city and no farther. The majority of people, like, for example, the majority of investors that I know in Vancouver will only invest in Vancouver. And that's just human nature. People like to invest locally. However, there definitely is a bunch, like a minority, but a bunch of investors who, once they go outside of their city, they'll go anywhere. And so that's kind of a question for you, because if an investor has never invested in your country before, that's going to slow down the process. You're going to have to do a lot of education. You're going to have to do a lot of kind of work to get them to wrap their head around it. Now, my encouragement to you is, if they have good industry experience and good business model experience as an investor, it's worth investing that time, right? So just keep that in mind. Now, the fourth criteria that I'm going to put in is what I will call impact. Now, Sunila, this goes to the root of the second part of your question, which is, should they be focused only on our industry or explore other sectors too? So there is a subset of investors out there that we call impact investors. So impact investors are people who are investing to make the world a better place. When there are investors who are trying to make the world a better place, they will invest more. The term that I use is eclectic. So in other words, they will invest in different industries and they will invest in different business models. But what they're looking at is not the industry or business model. They're looking on the positive impact that you are creating. And so I'm going to give you guys a couple of examples. I'm just quickly typing in, or at least trying to be quick. Great, just typing it in. EVPA, great. Okay, so the two organizations that I just put into chat, one is Tonic, and you'll notice it is spelled with two I's. Tonic is the largest collection of impact investors in the world. And the second one, EVPA, is the European Venture Philanthropy Association, and they are also a collection of impact investors. And so if, for example, Sunila, that if your company was making the world a better place, then you would also look to those types of investors. Now, final comment, if any of you have not yet been, I just typed in a website which is called angel.co, and also known as AngelList. And in AngelList, and let me see if I can do this. I am going to attempt to do a quick share screen. So let me just quickly unfocus screen. And then I am going to try and switch. All right, hey, there we go. I'm going to do a share screen of AngelList so you guys can actually see what I'm talking about. All right, so here we are. This is AngelList, or angel.co. And You can see over here, we have some investing stories over here. You'll notice, by the way, COVID-19 impact on venture-backed startups. So some good news and information. It's a fantastic resource and definitely well worth taking a look at. And by the way, if you do create an account in there, do follow me. I will follow you back. Would love to do that. But under more, we have syndicates, venture funds, companies, investors. So now what I'm doing is I'm clicking on the investor tab, and I'm just waiting for the internet to slowly respond to me. And here it is. And so I want to highlight something to you, which is if I click on everyone, you'll notice something here. It says, well, geez, there's 6.3 million people in total in AngelList. If I click on roll, notice here I can click on angel investors. When I click on angel investors, I come down to 2.9 million. And then what I want to do is I want to say, locations. Now, if I type in Albania and I look up angel investor, I have 846 results. So now I can start to take a look at who has they're from Albania, they live in Albania, and maybe they also invest in Albania, right? So you'll notice here, Kustrim is a good example, clearly from Albania, but lives currently in the United Kingdom, has tagged himself as an angel investor. And so this is a great example of finding people. Aida is a great example as well, currently living in Hong Kong. And we can quickly go down the list and see a whole different group of names. Now, these people have all tagged themselves as angel investors. Now, what if I went into a market and said, travel and tourism? Notice it all goes down to one result. Now, that is because I have become more and more specific. So what happens if I remove Albania, but stick with travel and tourism? Well, now I'm back up to 815 results. So the reason I'm sharing this with you, sorry, sorry everybody, I forgot to focus my screen. My bad. So just to highlight, here you can see what I've done is under more, I clicked on investors. I clicked on everyone on the left-hand side under your networks. Then I selected under role, I selected angel investor. And then under market, I selected travel and tourism. And you can see I have 815 results. And so it's a great opportunity for you to start to play with and identify people. So Sunila, my encouragement to you is start by looking at AngelList and start to play around with these different filters. Again, just using the top navigation, more, click on more, then on investors, and then using this tool to identify people. Now, I will highlight to everyone that there's a couple of other places that you can look. The first one I want to mention is Gust. Gust.com is another platform. It's not quite as easy to use, but definitely has a lot of investors in it. And then the other one that I will mention is Crunchbase. Now, with Crunchbase tends to be very US-centric, not as many, say, European, Asian, other investors, but there could definitely be some people out of the US that you could target. And so, so I think just some really, really good examples of some people that you can take a peek at and start to identify the right people for yourself. So, so great question. Thank you for asking it, Sunila. Great. Now, Olsi also asked a question, and the question is, we have been almost 5 months of 2020, and most of us somehow have done their best to survive this pandemic reality. Agreed. Do we need to wait till this new normal gets stability, or do we have to keep trying for new possibilities? And so, Olsi, I just maybe to clarify, are you referring to, do you have to wait until you try and start to raise money? I'm assuming this is specific to raising money. I just want to make sure. Because if it is, then what I will do is I will share with you the kind of current trends that are happening. Oh, so starting new ideas. Yeah, and also my comment to you is, as it relates to starting new ideas, I actually think that it is a great time anytime to start a new idea. But I personally think that if your new idea allows you to generate revenue early, I actually think a recession is the ideal time to start a business. And in my particular case, I have twice started a business during a recession. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is that you are in a place where, customers are not pretending, right? Like you either have, you're either solving a problem or you're not. And so I really like the clarity that customers give you in a recession. And the second reason that I like it is because it really kind of compels you, it forces you to focus on revenue and making sure that there's fair exchange of value. And so for me, I really like this time to do it. So you do ask this larger question, which is, do we do a new idea or do we keep with the one that you're going now? It really just depends on the current idea and if the customer wants it, if the customer needs it, if you can get paid to do it, and if it's profitable. Now, also, it might be possible that your idea today, your old idea, is actually just something you have to pause because of the lockdown, right? Because COVID. If it is just something you need to pause because of the lockdown and COVID, then my comment to you is it's okay to pause it for the time being and work on a new idea. But do assess your business. And Luann, maybe sometime between now and the end of this session, maybe we can dig up a link or send us a follow-up, our workbook for how to assess current ideas to respond. So it's our resilience handbook. And so Luann and I can probably send that as a follow-up to this session, or Luann can dig it up now. And so my encouragement to you, Olsi, is if your current idea is stuck in lockdown, then put it on the shelf for now, work on the new idea. If your current idea is just something you're just never going to make money at, then yes, do stop and then start a new idea. But if you're just, if you're still trying to adapt the new idea, but you see that it is possible, then my encouragement, to be honest, would probably be just really focus hard on that, adapt it, pivot it, get to a place of resilience, and then you can kind of drive from there. So, so just keep that in mind. Cool. So that's a great question. A couple of great questions in a row. Keep those questions coming, everybody. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to swap my share back to my presentation. And this time I will remember to focus it so that we don't lose it and it's not hard to see. Here we go. Great. Okay, we're back. Just a couple things to keep in mind. In terms of pitching investors, just remember pitching an investor is just the first step, right? Like it's just creating a good first impression. And you'll then, in the subsequent meetings, you'll be answering questions and getting to clarity and making sure that it makes sense to do an investment, right? Like that's going to be the focal point. So my encouragement to you is that you will see presentations. I'm sure some of you have seen pitches in the past. And so my encouragement to you is that, even though often you'll see anywhere from 16 to 25 slides in a presentation, the big 6 slides are these 6, right? So how big is the problem you're trying to solve and how big? How do you solve that problem? How are you different from the competition, which I find is often the place where entrepreneurs struggle the most to make sure that they clearly say how they are different from the competition. How do you make money? How amazing is your team? And then the ask. You always need to be clear on the ask. How much are you asking for? Why are you asking for that amount? And what are you using that money for? Now, as a couple of suggestions, there is a website which is called Pitch Envy. And Pitch Envy is a great website to look at sample pitches. You will also find some really good pitches in SlideShare, sample pitches that you can take a look at. And then another place that I think is worth looking at, and in particular, you can look at this on YouTube, but Techstars sometimes will film their demo days. And then what you can do is you can actually watch their demo day and see how their entrepreneurs have built their pitches. And so those are three great resources for you to be like, hey, yes, I do need to build a pitch for my pursuit of funding, but like, where do I start? What do I look at? What makes sense? And so do take the time to take a look at those. And if you are looking for any templates of a pitch, then my encouragement to you is, reach out to, myself or Luann at any time. Be happy to share some additional resources. And so just with that in mind, I'm just going to quickly pop in for those who have not yet connected with me in LinkedIn. That is my LinkedIn. And so do take a peek at that. And yeah, just if you can take a peek, that'd be fantastic. Connect up with me if you want to see some samples. If you have some other questions after the session is over, just connect up with me. I'd be happy to connect. Cool. So just continuing on, as we are talking about this, fundraising is work, there is this term that is called due diligence. And due diligence is, just a simple term that we use for what we call homework, right? It's the homework that an investor will do on you and your business to make sure that they actually want to invest. And it really is broken down into these four phases. Pre-diligence is your first meeting. And then under phase one, this is where the investor is starting to get more excited about your business, right? And so you can see things like getting to know the team better, understanding technology. If you have technology, how do you distribute? How do you get to market? How do you make money? These are all things that they use to get more excited about the business. Now, when we move to phase two is really about, now I want to be a little bit more cautious. I want to make sure that I'm making a smart investment. And so I'm looking at potential areas of risk, right? So SWOT, strength, weakness, opportunity, threats, total attainable market. Is it really big enough for return on investment? What other risks exist? And then this final phase, phase three, is what really we call ticks in a checkbox. And these are things that people will ask as they go through to make sure that they find all the information that they need to know in order to be ready. And so one thing that I would encourage coming out of here is that you want to create your own checklist, and you want to take a look at you want to take a look at your own checklist and make sure that you're ready before you start talking to investors. And the reason for that is because sometimes you'll have an investor who gets really excited quickly in that first meeting, and then they say, hey, listen, I'd love to see your due diligence materials. And they'll ask in the first meeting. And if they do, you need to be ready, right? So the important part is create your checklist now. If you guys do need a checklist, like a sample checklist, just let us know and we'd be happy to share a sample with you. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to touch on a quick question that Anita asked in the chat. And so, how is the T in the SWOT different from the risks? And that's really an excellent question. Threats so the T in SWOT is generally referring to external threats. So for example, COVID-19 crisis and recession, that is an external threat. Risks on this list are a little bit more anecdotal, and they can be a mix of smaller internal and external risks. So for example, what would be a good one? Maybe a risk that your legal contracts with your employees are not set up properly. So it's not really a weakness and it's not really an external threat. It's just like, is there a risk that your legal documents aren't set up properly? So, Anita, it's a great question. On a personal note, I tend to lump them all together and just treat it as like anything that is a weakness or a threat that I need to make sure that I address. Anita, great example. Yeah, for sure. So I think these are good questions to ask. And in particular, what we want to do is ask ourselves, the question of our business, like, where is that risk? And so I think that's an important distinction. So thanks for kind of noting up that question, Anita. That was great. So just continuing on. So let's talk about raising now. So raising in this kind of recession that we're in. And there's 4 things to keep in mind. One is the investor view. The second one is how to respond. The third one is we'll then just open it up for Q&A, and then we'll wrap this whole session with next steps. So raising from investors at all times, including in a recession, it's just important to note that there are a couple of key questions that all investors will ask anytime. Recession, no recession, doesn't matter. I would also say that this is true of investors anywhere in the world. It doesn't matter where they are geographically. So when will I get my money back? I know you're early stage and I know you're high risk. It doesn't matter. I'm looking to get my money back. And so tell me how I'm going to do that. Why else am I doing this? Really, really important question. Am I doing it because I want to give back? Am I doing it because I want to contribute my time to the business? Am I doing it because I want to leave a legacy, right, of something big impact that I've created? And then this last question is the most important question of all, which is at every point in time and at every meeting, the investor is always asking themselves this question: can I trust you and your team with my money? So if you want to dramatically increase the probability of your fundraising round being complete and your fundraising being successful and efficient, just remember every single time that you are stepping into a meeting with an investor, ask yourself the question, what can I tell them today that will help them to trust me and my team more? So will you tell them about a win? Will you tell them about how you are adapting in the crisis? Will you tell them about a problem that you identified and resolved, right? Like, so what are you going to tell me that will increase that trust? And so that's a really, really important thing to always remember. So when I raise a round, and I've done it 4 times myself, I actually take a sheet of paper just like this. And before every call, I actually create a cheat sheet. Like I create a list of the things that I could tell an investor to make sure that I'm increasing the trust level. And then I review it after the call. Because ultimately your businesses are probably not doing 5 million euros a year in revenue. And if that is true, all I can do is trust you and your team that you're going to be a good steward or a good guide for my money, right? You are going to be a good investment, you personally, your team. And so just keep that in mind. I can't emphasize that enough. And so just a heads up, everybody, Luann has included the spring due diligence checklist on the button that you can see down below, the green button that says click here for more resources. So that is a sample due diligence checklist that you guys can use to prepare to raise money when you are ready to do so. And if you have any questions, definitely let me know. And I'd be happy to answer those questions at any time. Now, in this current time, and we talked a little bit about this, actually, I think in our very first webinar several weeks ago, investors are going to focus on their portfolio first during this recession, make sure that they're surviving. And then there's a couple of things that some people do. One will they'll pause to see what's happening and get certainty. Some people are going to go deal hunting because some entrepreneurs will reduce their valuations, right? They're gonna be willing to take a cheaper deal. And then some smaller investors have been hit by the public markets, by their stock market investments, and so they will actually have to pause. But there is something very important to note, and this happens to be a set of statistics related to venture capital funds, and that is that the amount of investment that occurs in the time frame of a recession is the exact same amount of activity pre and post. So the amount of investment, deals, the number of deals actually do not drop at all. And that is statistics from both the 01 to 03 recession, as well as the 08 to 09/2010 recession. And so the reason I'm sharing that with you is because you want to have confidence that people are going to invest anyways. What does happen, though, is that the average investment amount drops by about 20 to 25%. So if you wanted to raise €1 million before, now the average is probably about 750,000 euros. But the deals are still being done. So the important part is to have confidence that that is happening. Now, my anticipation is that investors have generally been quieter through COVID. I think that will stay the same through to the end of August. And I think you will see a lot of activity in the fall. So September 2020 through kind of end of April 2021, I think you're going to see a lot of activity there to make up for lost time. So I'm just going to touch on a comment that has been added in the chat by Anita. So it says here, during a visit to Israel for a previous job, I came across a very interesting concept. Angel investors were sometimes supporting startups, even if they knew they would fail. The logic was to give the team a chance to bond and mature, to use them for another project. No, Anita, all good on the grammar. So it is important to note from Anita's comment that in these early stages, investors are investing in you as much or more than the company itself. And so, Anita, I actually have a great example myself from the 08-09 recession, where a friend of mine was running a startup. And first, I thought the idea wasn't great to begin with. And second, it was terrible in a recession. And I actually saw local investors invest about 240,000 euros into that business in 09. For sure, the company was going to fail, but they were investing because they really believed in the team. And what I will tell you is that the company did not outright fail. What happened is they managed to sustain it and adapt it just enough to get it acquired, just for shares. There was no cash. It was not really a great deal per se. But what happened is the company, it ended up being a win because it was sold. And the team then became available for new ideas and for new companies. And so it is interesting to watch that psyche of some investors. I mean, I also know many investors who would never touch, a failing idea. But that's why we build these relationships with investors, so we know where they will sit during these times. And so, great example. So just a couple of other things. It is important to note that during a recession, investors can just take their time. They can move more slowly than average because they just want to see how you and the team handle adversity. And so it is important to note we as entrepreneurs, we can't blame the investors, and we can't get frustrated about it because they do this. Because if we were in their shoes, we would probably do the same. So what we want to do is honor that they're going to be patient, and then we create a sales process in the investment process, and we adapt our business to know that they're going to be more patient. And our goal is to do one of two things: either convince them to move faster, or to just be able to bridge until they are ready to move. Now, how to respond to this? And just to give everybody a bit of a heads up, I actually I have some additional content, and I will I can go through it if you want, but probably in about 5 to 7 minutes, I'll be done the core content that I have. And what we can do is we can just open it up to questions. So, start to throw your questions in, start to talk about it. But I do want to highlight a few things. If you want to respond well to what investors are thinking during a crisis and during a recession, there really are 4 steps that you would go through. So the first one is you have to update your plan, right? So investors, the first question I would say almost every investor will ask you right now is, how are you adapting your business to the recession? So you need to have a very clear, concrete answer to that question. How are you adapting to the recession? What are you changing? Why? What have you learned so far? How are you adapting? Right? So these are the questions that you're going to go through. In addition to that, what we want to do is take a look at any of those fast funding sources that are out there, like grants, subsidies, loans. Now, in the case of grants, if you guys remember earlier, for those who were here at the beginning, there was a URL that was added into the chat for the Challenge Fund, which is from EU for Innovation. And that is an example of one of the grant opportunities that exists in Albania right now. And so I would definitely encourage you to take a look at any of the other additional kind of topics that exist there. The third item that I would share is that you have to grow your revenue. Like, investors are looking for you to prove that you can make it through without investment. And that if they do invest, that investment is a strategic investment, right? That their investment can be used to grow the business and not just survive the recession, right? And so keep that in mind as you go through. And then the last one, of course, is to reboot your funding plan. And what I mean by reboot your funding plan is to think about, when do I want the money to hit my bank account? How much money do I want to raise? Who do I want to raise it from? And then the third one is, or the final one, I should say, is the terms, right? So what paperwork will I use and so forth. And so the final comment here, it says they need to be able to show adaptability. And this whole list is from Justin Wynn, who's a partner at Monks Hill Ventures. Now, the reason I put this on this slide is because Monks Hill Ventures is actually based in Vietnam. This list is the exact same list I use in Canada. And so I wanted to highlight to you that this list of what investors are looking for and how you can stand out from the crowd in a fundraising is actually based on the fact that we have, kind of universal truth. And so if you're pursuing investors in Berlin, Tallinn, Estonia, London, where else? New York City, Silicon Valley, Singapore, it doesn't matter. This is the same list of things that you will do to make sure that you stand out from the crowd and you raise money well. So those are some of the key topics that I just wanted to highlight. And so as a part of your new plan, what you want to be able to do is you want to be able to update your plan. What markets, what sectors are being impacted? How are you responding to that? We've talked about a bunch of that over the last several sessions. And if you need resource material for that, let us know, because we can not only get you the recordings from the prior sessions, but we can also get you the workbooks. In addition to that, looking at your revenue, new sources, new channels, new pricing models, product. Have you cut expenses? Where have you cut expenses? Why? How much cash do you have? So these are the key things that you want to dig into as you go through this process of raising money during a recession, is to really be prepared for these questions that we know are going to be coming. Cool. And So equity rounds in a recession, now what we're going to do is we're going to try and make ourselves look like the top 5%. And so there's a couple ways that we're going to do that. One is that we're going to stretch out our cash. And we've been talking about that through past sessions as well, but really making sure that we have the maximum amount of runway or months to be able to adapt and to be able to survive. In addition to that, what we want to do is create momentum that the investors can see and show that resilience. And I just want to highlight a couple of things as you're starting to go through. Remember, I was saying earlier that as an investor, I asked the question, can I trust you and your team with my money? You stretch your cash. That helps me to trust you. You create momentum and show resilience. You're adapting. That helps me to trust you. If you're recession proofing your customer acquisition efforts, right? Like if you're finding customers who will buy even in a recession, that helps me to increase my trust in you. So those top three are really about that trust question that we were talking about earlier. But most entrepreneurs, I will tell you, do not plan to actually share this, right? You just kind of like, hey, invest in my company, invest in my company. And you don't want to do that. What you want to do is say, I'm an awesome entrepreneur. My team is amazing. We are resilient. We are thriving and adapting through this recession. Therefore, it'd be really smart of you to invest in my business, right? Like that's a very different tone from what we typically see. Adjusting the terms of your deal. And so what I mean by this is the size of the round, the paperwork that you use, when you want to close or have the money received. Sometimes that will help you to stand out. Again, if you remember earlier, that the average size of a round will drop by 20 to 25% during a recession. So it's a way for you to think about how much should I be raising? Do I change that? And just be thoughtful about it. And then the last point that I want to highlight is what we talked about earlier, which is that subcategory of investors, which are impact investors, and show your impact. So if your business does make the world a better place, and do note that when I say world could be you're making Albania a better place, you're making the Balkans a better place, you're making Europe a better place, or you're making the world as a whole a better place. All of those fit and apply. Now, if you are wondering how you can best identify with an investor about how you can show your impact, then the way that you do that is by referencing the UN Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs for short. And what you can do is actually refer to them and say, we are making the world a better place, or we're making Albania a better place. And the way that we do it is by, and then what you want to do is identify with one or more of the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals. And the reason for that is because that tends to be the most universally accepted definition of impact is that you're addressing one or more of the SDGs. And so just a really good and easy way for you to think about that. And then I'm going to kind of head to next steps. And obviously I'm going to say thank you to you for innovation. But before I go there, and by the way, you guys can tell that I live near the airport as the plane goes by. One of the interesting things is that in Canada, they started to lift the lockdown a little bit last week. And so we're starting to notice, because there's probably twice as many planes flying in the last couple of days that have been during the lockdown. So noise aside, I'm going to pause here for a minute, and I just want to open it up to any and all questions that you might have about fundraising. And I'm going to start. Sunila has raised something, and what I'm going to do, Sunila, is I'm going to slide this under Ask a Question, just so that I can track it. And so you say, do you believe that social enterprises and or impact investments are more probable to be funded during this period if we assume that the current situation has increased the sensitivity, empathy of people, that in fact they are our potential customers? So Sunila, you ask a very important question, and that question is probably one of the bigger debates that is being held right now in investing circles. And the experience that I have seen so far is that there are a couple of types of businesses that right now have a much higher probability to be funded. First is anything related to health, especially things like mobile health, healthcare, health apps. So health is number one. Number two, food, anything related to food. And number three is anything related to impact. And that would be things like access to capital. What else? Creating opportunities for people who have reduced opportunities. So underrepresented, so female founders, for example, or indigenous founders. But I want to highlight something else that's really important to note. Healthcare is in and of itself impact. Second, anything related to creating access to food is impact. And so in reality, I personally, what I am seeing in my ecosystem and in my network is that the things that are getting invested in first right now are impact centric. And the reason for that is because there's some pressing need, getting access to food, especially in developing countries, getting access to healthcare for sure. And so, but then we're also seeing, for example, a big increase in investment activity around clean tech, because, people can kind of look out the window, not as big of an issue in Albania, but when you look at places like Hanoi, Vietnam, if you look at India, parts of China, during the lockdown, the amount of air pollution dropped dramatically, and it really spurred this kind of belief that we need to address some of these bigger issues. So overall, Sunila, I would say that is definitely become a priority topic for a lot of investors. And not everybody. There's some people still doing what they do. A friend of mine, Boris, is still investing in marketplaces because that's what he does, and it hasn't changed. But we're definitely at Spring anyways, we're definitely seeing a big increase in impact investing. And so it's a great question, and thanks for asking it. And I'd love to see what other questions or comments that people have right now on this topic, and I'd be happy to go through some additional information as well, if that makes sense. But maybe as an aside, I'm curious if anybody on this call has raised money before from investors, and how you're feeling about the situation right now. Would love to hear those thoughts. In addition, I'm wondering if anybody has any questions about how to approach investors, like how to connect with them for the first time. I think would be a really interesting conversation to have as well. So if anybody wants to go through that, that would be great. So any questions and any comments that you guys might have would be welcome at this time. And if not, I'll dig into a few other topics as well. So I'll just pause for a minute. And while I am pausing, what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to slide down. I'm going to share a couple more things. Cool. So sometimes we have a situation where we talk about a lot of terms, and fundraising is term heavy. And so I just want to cover off a few things. Bootstrapping is where you just grow your business without outside financing. I will tell you that investors right now love to hear how you describe how you are bootstrapping. So bootstrapping is a term that really helps you in the fundraising process right now. Angel investor, it is important to note that we use that term for anybody who is not a friend or family member. So they're a stranger to you. Venture capital fund or firm is a professional firm, and their job is to invest in other businesses. A round which we've talked about before, the amount of money that you receive in investment at one point in time from investors at the same terms. And so I think just so when you hear the term round, an investor says to you, what are you trying to do in this round? It means how much are you trying to raise in this time period, right? So just keep that in mind. I'm going to pause here for a second. Anita raised a comment. On one hand, the investors may wish to be prudent in these times, but on the other hand, they may be keen to invest as there is an abundance of ideas circulating as we speak. So Anita, that is correct. In addition to that, we used the term earlier, which is another reason why they get active is because they're deal hunting. So in other words, some entrepreneurs will reduce the price of their round because they need the money a little bit more. And so they'll go deal hunting. So fantastic comment. And then in addition to that, we have a question. Any recommendations on how to approach investors in a virtual way? Things are slowly opening up, but networking events face-to-face is still going to be slow to pick up again. So that's a great question. So there's a few ways that you can approach investors. And I am going to give my perspective on this. And I'm going to quickly brainstorm it into the chat. So in no particular order, because I think you want to use multiple tools to connect up with people. I'm just going to quickly type a few things in here. So as a starting point, cold outreach in finding ways to plug in. You can connect with investors in LinkedIn. You can also connect directly with investors in AngelList. Remember we were talking earlier, and Sunila had raised this, do we focus on people who understand our industry? When you connect with an investor in LinkedIn or AngelList, you actually have an opportunity where you can say to them, hey, we are a great startup and we're looking for investment. And my company is in tourism, and I know that you invest in tourism, would love to take the time. So what you want to do when you're cold outreaching is find the commonalities. Have they invested in your industry in the past? Have they invested in your business model in the past? Have they invested in your region in the past, right? So find those connection points. Now, if you are looking for referrals, one is join an incubator or accelerator that you know has access to investors. And they could be local incubators, accelerators, they could be regional, or they could be global, right? So it's important to note you want to pick the right one for you, but that's a great example. Luann, great point. When you are reaching out and you touch base, you definitely want to have a script so that you can, just be prepared for that call. And I completely agree. I think the number one source of referrals is by connecting to CEOs that they have invested in. So if you identify an investor and you think that they're a great fit for your organization, what you want to do is you want to see what other companies they've invested in, reach out to those companies, those CEOs, and say, hey, listen, I'm raising a round. I think Bob, whoever, the investor, could be a great fit for my company. I noticed he invested in your company. Can I take 15 minutes of your time to find out what it's been like to work with Bob, the investor, right? So it's a great opportunity to kind of have a conversation to find out if the investor is good, because entrepreneurs will always tell the truth about investors. And then if it makes sense, then you can ask for an introduction. So just keep that in mind as you go through. So my encouragement is to do that. Now, the online pitch events, there's a couple that I know of. One is called Volition Pitch Nights, and they run periodic online pitch events. And it's a great way to not only practice your pitch, but also to connect up with some investors. In addition to that, Women in Tech World is also a great place to look for online pitch events for any of the female founders that are on this call. And so, yeah, so just, keep that in mind as you go through. So great question. Thanks for that. So just to continue on some of these terms, and ironically, we talked about SWOT earlier. I do want to talk about the size of the market. And for the size of the market, you will often hear a term, which is TAM, or total addressable market, or total attainable market. And TAM is sometimes you'll meet with an investor, especially if they're, say, from the US or Canada, sometimes Western Europe, where, as you're talking, they'd be like, hey, so what's your TAM? So TAM is total attainable market. And that is the size of your target market if you could sell to everyone in the world that fits that market. So if your market is purely Albania, then you would say the total size of the market is everyone in Albania who fits that target description. If it's Europe, then you give me that big number. Or if it's the world, even bigger number. But that's a number that you need to have, because what it is it's a number that inspires investors on the total potential upside of the opportunity. So just keep that in mind. Cap table is a term that is used to describe a spreadsheet that shows what is the ownership structure of your business. So who owns what in your business today? And so cap table, so Anita, if I use you as an example, maybe Anita, you're the only person who owns your business today. So your cap table would be one line, and it would say Anita, percentage of ownership, 100%, right? But if you co-founded a business with yourself and Luann, then maybe it's Anita at 50%, Luann at 50%, or Anita at 70% and Luann at 30%, right? So just make sure that you, kind of highlight and grab those pieces as you go through, and keep that in mind. And let us know if you need a sample cap table, because we can probably pull that up for you as well. And then just a couple of other things. We talked about due diligence. We talked about verbal commit as well. And so just a couple of great terms. We talked about stretch your cash before. I just want to highlight, a quick comment on the creating momentum point that I made earlier, which is with momentum and showing momentum so that you can stand out in your round. I just want to highlight that revenue is optional, but very strongly encouraged. One way for investors to believe that your idea is real and it's adding value to the marketplace is that you're showing revenue. But you can also show it with user acquisition, especially for any of you software folks on the call, and that your metrics are moving in the right direction, right? So user metrics are great, but things like average revenue per customer, number of repeat customers, number of referrals. And so these are great examples. So repeat customers, referrals, what we call average revenue or average deal size. So the average revenue per deal or per transaction. What are the numbers? Are they moving in the right direction? Are they making sense? Those would be things that I would definitely be encouraging you to take a look at as you go through this process. So just keep those items in mind as you go through. I think would be great. Now I'm going to go back to my presentation, and we are going to head towards a wrap up. I just want to see if there's anything else that might be interesting to you guys. Yeah, I mean, we've spoken about this before. For those who have not yet seen this, when we were talking about the crisis, we talked about asking for help. But one thing that I will highlight to you guys is that when you start to raise money, you will absolutely be sending a regular update email. And so the regular update email is something that you're going to send to any existing investors that you have. But as you start to meet investors, every time you meet them at the end of that call or connection, ask them if it's okay for you to add them to your update newsletter. And when they say yes, you can add them in. And so the way that I like to structure an email, I'm just going to quickly put this in. Let me see here. Team update, and then cool. So the structure of your update email specifically for fundraising should be that. So you start with big wins, if you have any. Metrics update, that is an absolute in every single email. And then you go sales and marketing, product, team, finance and funding, ask, offer. One ask, one offer, right? So always make sure that you include those. And you want to send that every month, first week of the month. So I'll give you an example. For any of you who are planning on raising money in the next 6 months, my recommendation is add Luann and I to your first ever monthly update email, which you will send at the first week of June. And if you want to add me to that email, my email address, keith@spring.is, and Luann beat me to the punch. There you go. I owe Luann a drink, apparently. And so, but my encouragement to you is send that update email, because that update email, first, it reminds me of who you are. Second, it gets me up to speed so that the next time we talk, we don't have to take 20 minutes for you to tell me what's going on. I already know, because I read those emails, right? And so then what we can do is we can focus on the important stuff, the challenges and the opportunities and the questions. So just keep that in mind as you're going through. I'm going to pop in. There's a question. What is the difference between Series A and B? Is it the amount? How do you know how much to ask for? And so that's a great question. That question is raised by Erkins. And so for this question, I'm actually going to take a step back, and I'll actually also address the question of seed round. And so for a seed round is often the first professional round of capital that you will raise. A seed round often occurs when the company is somewhere between launch and what I would say is about 1 million euros in annual revenue. And in a seed round, you can be money losing or you can be profitable. It won't matter. So a pre-seed or a seed round is early, launch to 1 million in annual revenue. You could still be losing money quite easily. You might be making money. And a pre-seed or seed round is primarily invested in by angel investors. Now, moving on to A round. A round is, generally speaking, when a business is doing at least one, so I'm going to say between 1 and 5 million in annual revenue. You're seeing a really good growth rate. And so with 1 million in revenue, it's not about being profitable or not profitable. 1 million in revenue tells me that you have achieved what we call product business model fit. And so Series A is about product business model fit, where you're really kind of proving that you know how you're going to make money. And what you're doing now is you're taking an injection of capital in order to actually begin that first meaningful amount of growth. And now when you talk about the size of the round, Erkins, that is a really big, it depends. I have seen A rounds be as small as 1 million euros. I have seen A rounds be as large as 50 million euros. But practically speaking, I would say the average is probably 5 to 10 million euros for an A round. And, honestly, 6 months ago, 9 months ago, it was probably more like 10 to 15 million euros, but it has come down in the recession. Now, a B round, north of 5 million in annual revenue, you are profitable. You have absolutely proven product market fit. You now have a more robust product roadmap and a product set. You have a substantial team, which all the key roles in the team are filled. And now it's just pure growth. And that's a B round. And so those are the distinctions. Notice I actually did not say anything about profitability between seed A and B. And the reason is because some businesses, a very, very, very tiny few, are what we call unicorn businesses. And so sometimes with a unicorn business, investors are willing to defer profitability in order to see growth. But I would say for the vast majority, when you get to A rounds, they will expect you to be at very close or at profitability, and B round for sure profitability. So great question. Thanks for asking it. And then we also have another question from Mentor. How do you calculate the percentage of equity in return to the investment while still at MVP stage without revenue? So Mentor, I am going to assume, and that's a great question as well, I am going to assume that you are launched, but just with a minimum viable product, right? So MVP, for those who have not heard the term, is minimum viable product, MVP. And it does not refer to Michael Jordan, in case anybody's watching The Last Dance on Netflix. But MVP is your minimum viable product. And when you are launched, in general, Mentor, people will expect you to give up about 20% of your business at that stage. Now, the range is really somewhere between 10 and 25%, but the average is about 20%. And the reason is because that is a generally accepted norm for how much you should give up, because in the future, prior, like if you remember Erkin's question where he was saying seed, A, B round. So if you give up 20% here, 20% here, 20% here, what investors are thinking is, I want to take as much as I reasonably should, but my belief is that your business will continue to grow and you may need future rounds of capital. So we need to balance the dilution, or this percent that you give up, over each subsequent round. So generally speaking, the average is 20%. There are differences between individual investors that you need to determine. And there's also differences in region. But what I would say is the universal truth is 20%. And there's really only one country that I can think of which really is outside of the norms of that, and that is Pakistan, where investors tend to take somewhere between 50 and 60%, which is terrible. But that's what they do. But everywhere else, I would say your target is 20%. So it's a great question. And thanks for asking. Anita, thank you. Having all of you be a part of this process has been incredible. Anita, when the lockdown is lifted and Luann and I come to Albania, what we'll do is we will lean on Erkins to open up InnoSpace, and we'll have a couple of bottles of wine handy, and then we'll keep going in person. So you can count on that. I am so excited to come for sure. And then I'm just going to highlight a couple last minute things for everybody. One is that, for this session and for all the prior sessions, EU for Innovation, again, so amazing. Thank you so much for having us. It's been great conversations. I do want to highlight, we're going to have one last session, which is next week. And that's actually going to be the other side of the table, which is investing in uncertain times. And it's actually a great time for both entrepreneurs and investors in Albania and the Balkans to come together and talk about this. And so really, really excited for that final session. Do keep in touch. Now, I have put my LinkedIn profile here. I also put in the Olsi, yes. Chocolate. I love chocolate. And so you can count on that. Luann and I, if you guys want as a kind of a teaser for when we come. If you want to look up Purdy's Chocolates is is probably considered to be the best chocolatier in Canada, and we will bring some of that with us to Albania, and then we'll enjoy that with a little bit of wine, and we'll talk further for sure. So my encouragement to everyone is connect up with us in LinkedIn. Thanks, Luann, for popping our LinkedIn links one last time. If you guys don't know Erkins already, do connect up with Erkins at InnoSpace Tirana. Sarah was on at least at the beginning, and Sarah's with EU for Innovation. And so, yeah, just Sarah's still here. Thank you, Sarah. And so, yeah, do connect up with everybody. Remember, folks, like it takes a village to raise a business. It takes a village to save a business. We are all in this together. Please remember, do not wait for the next webinar. Do not wait for us to come to Albania. If you need help, you reach out anytime. We will be here for you. And we'd love to talk for sure. And definitely excited to try chocolate and wine with all of you, which is going to be great. Any last minute questions before we break for this session? Cool. By the way, guys, Luann has never been to Albania. And I think all of this talk of first getting to know you guys and becoming friends, and the second one is talking about red wine and chocolate. I think you have convinced Luann to make the trip as well. So I'm excited for that. Yeah, Leonida is a great one for sure. Cool. Great. Well, listen, everybody, thanks so much I've had halal, by the way, and it is excellent. It's really, really good. Yeah, we're definitely going to have a bit of a wine and chocolate tour. So thanks, everybody. We will call it a day. I hope you guys have a fantastic evening. I'd look forward to seeing you guys next week. Thanks again for becoming a part of this, becoming a part of the Spring community, the EU for Innovation community. Yeah, really looking forward to chatting soon. So we'll talk soon, everyone. Thanks a lot. Have a great night.